Mayor, we can't hear you. There you go. Try again.
You hear me? All
Now
right,
we
cool.
can.
Let's go ahead and call. All right, we're going to go ahead and call the May 25th, 2021 Longmont City Council regular session to order. If we can go ahead and start with Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Peck, do you want to lead us tonight?
Thank you. Yes. So
All right.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the
to
flag,
the flag
of
of
the United
States of
America and to
to
the
the
republic
republic
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one
under
nation,
God,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice
for
for all.
All right, just a quick reminder to the public, go ahead and you need to watch the live stream if you want to participate in tonight's first call, public invited to be heard. If you miss it, don't fret. We will conclude tonight's council meeting with the last call or final call, public invited to be heard. So that said, let's go ahead and can I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 11th, 2021, the regular session meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Dr. Waters, seconded by Councilmember Peck. Seeing no debate or changes, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries unanimously and the regular session minutes of the 11th of May are passed and adopted. All right, any agenda revisions, submission of documents and whatnot? Councilmember Peck? And then
Thank
Dr.
you, Mayor.
Waters.
So at the time that council voted to legalize marijuana in Longmont, council also voted to take half of the marijuana tax and put it toward affordable housing. So we're in the new budget year, creating the budget for 2022. So I'm going to move to direct staff to earmark or set aside the second half of the marijuana tax for mental health and addiction, with the application of the funds to be determined by staff and council at a later date.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. This is just to put it on the agenda to discuss. We're not voting tonight. So let's go ahead and I have no problem putting it on the agenda to have this discussion. My only other question will be, what is the opportunity cost? I'd like staff to also tell us, we didn't spend it on this. What else would we spend it on? But all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Councilmember Peck. Anything else? Okay, Dr. Waters, you got four.
Can I ask a question, Mayor Bagley? Thanks for
Sure, go ahead. The floor is yours.
the question is to the council. Is there any chance that the council would consider moving the open forum from June 15th to June 23rd? If so, I would move to do that. And the reason why is that I'm going to be out of the country on June 15th on a trip that was planned a year ago. That got rescheduled. We had no control over when it was rescheduled. When we set these dates, I didn't know then it would be a conflict with the open forum. And if the council would indulge that, I just hate missing the open forum, but it's on me that I would miss it if it's going to be on the 15th. I understand that. And I would fully understand if nobody wants to make the change, but I can't do it without at least asking whether or not there's any possibility.
So my question is, the 22nd of June, that council meeting was canceled. So why did we cancel it?
I think probably because of CML.
They had a CML week. So my question is, CML is still occurring, right? So what if we were to change it to the 29th? Could we swap that out?
I think it would be the 30th, wouldn't it?
I think I'm in the right year. No, it's the 29th of Tuesday, 30th is a Wednesday.
Oh, got it. You're right. I'm sorry. Yep.
I was just
yeah.
told. So I was just told that CML moved the conference to September.
Okay. Then
but we could also do the other date if you wanted as well.
All right. What do you guys want to do? Councilmember Christensen?
Given that the 22nd was canceled, I planned, that's the only time I can take a vacation because we're not meeting then. And so I would be happy to change it to 29th. I would not like to change it to the 22nd.
Well, let's keep the 22nd canceled, and then let's just swap the forum with the 29th. Anyone object to that? All right, Harold, let's go ahead and swap it. Let's do the 29th is
Harold?
go ahead.
So,
Somebody say Harold.
yeah, I did. So the
Jim, go
29th
ahead.
is a regular session scheduled currently. And we do have ordinances for our next water bond issue going on first reading that night. So if we still had the regular meeting as well as the open forum, it would be all right. But otherwise, we have concerns about when we're going to be able to close on that issue relative to
Why
the need
don't-
for those monies.
Then why don't we go ahead and make a small list of things that are crucial to budget, water bonds, et cetera, that we can deal with on the consent agenda and then go right into the public forum. Would that work? Jim, would that work?
We could. We also have to present the audit that night because we have to have it done before the 30th of the month. So there's
How long
both
does
of
that,
those things.
how long does the audit
Listen,
take?
I'm complicating things for the city that I shouldn't complicate. So we'll just proceed with the plan and I'll catch up on the open forum.
All right. Councilmember Christensen?
Oh, yeah, this would make trouble for Jim, but I was going to suggest, since the open forum was scheduled for the 15th, we could just do what Jim wants to do the 15th, but that would mean he'd have to do it 2 weeks earlier, and that's not really very fair to do to him. Anyway,
I agree on that one. So Harold, why don't you do this? Why don't we keep it on the 15th? But if you can come up with another option, let me know and we can talk. Fair enough?
Okay, yeah.
So we don't have to take
Yeah,
up
let me-
council. So
Let me work with staff and see what it is, what
Right.
other options are. We'll
Perfect.
send those out to you.
worst case scenario, we're still on for the 15th. And if we can make it work, Doc, we will. Fair enough? All right. Okay, let's go on to city manager's report. We don't have any special reports or presentations tonight, right? All right. So then do you have any slides tonight, Harold?
I don't have any slides. I just wanted to say to you all that the numbers.
Well, no, but if you don't have slides, what I want to do is I want to throw up the first call public invited to be heard screen
Oh,
and ask
okay.
people to start calling in and queuing up now so we don't have to take a break when we're still not tired. So let's go ahead and throw up the first call invited to be heard. And then Harold, why don't you go ahead and give us the COVID update?
So what I wanted to tell you all is the numbers continue to move in a really good direction. We're continuing to make progress on vaccinations. As you all know, the big update for me today is the masking order changed, and so we are, per council's direction of following the Boulder County orders, we are allowing the option of going unmasked to anyone who's fully vaccinated in our facilities. There are a few exceptions to this, which include childcare, indoor camps, and youth program facilities. And so we're in the process of posting the guidance on the building, so everyone's aware of that. And then, as we talked about earlier, that really then shifts us into at the point we were looking at the open forum, June 15th being the day where we have our first in-person council meeting. Obviously, with the other conversation as we look at that. It's still June 15th in terms of all of us coming together. But everything's moving in the right direction. And as we continue to get more people vaccinated, the better the numbers are doing. And again, the correlation is there between vaccination and case numbers. And our 7-day positivity is decreasing, and we're at 1.1%.
Cool. And then do you have any questions or comments regarding COVID for our esteemed city manager? All right, and then I guess my only question is on June 15th, whether we have council or whether we have an open forum, are we gonna let everybody come? There's just no restrictions, right?
Yeah, and unless it goes to 100, and then if it goes to 100, we have to have overflow
Okay,
components available so we can have people in different rooms.
that's great. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited. It'll be great. So, all right, cool. So how long, I haven't seen the public invited to be heard screen up.
It was up when I was talking.
Mayor,
Okay, good. So,
it's been up for about a minute and a half. And then
All right, then
I
let's
just
go
took
ahead.
it down.
all right, well, let's keep it up for another minute and a half. Do we have anybody in the queue?
Not at this time.
All right, well, let's just keep it up for another minute and a half and kind of just chill here for 90 seconds or so. And then if we don't get anybody who calls in, we'll proceed with our consent agenda. Actually, while we leave that up, Don, why don't you go ahead and read the consent agenda? That'll give us plenty of time.
You got it, Mayor. The consent
Thank you,
agenda.
thank you.
Item 9A is Resolution 2021-52, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the University of Colorado Boulder for grant funding for research on the effects of trails on plant species diversity. 9B is Resolution 2021-53, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for a lease of the Boulder County Fairgrounds parking lot for Rogers River Run. 9C is Resolution 2021-54, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the revocable permit and agreement between the city and Avid for Adventure, Inc. to use Union Reservoir for recreational purposes. 9D is Resolution 2021-55, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the revocable permit and agreement between the city and Able to Sail for summer camps. 9E is Resolution 2021-56, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Longmont and the State of Colorado Department of Local Affairs for grant funding for Defense Council First Appearance Grant Program.
I move the consent agenda.
Second.
That's great. It's been moved and seconded, but we're going to go ahead and wait to take the vote till after we hear first call public invited to be heard, just in case somebody's upset or wants to say something. So do we have anybody in the queue?
Mayor, we do not at this moment. And it's been about 3.5 minutes.
All right, so let's go ahead and close the first call public invited to be heard. And let's go ahead and take a vote. Anybody want to make a comment or take anything off the consent agenda? All right, then seeing that, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of passing the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Okay, let's go on to ordinances on second reading. We're going to go ahead and throw it up again. Let's go ahead and open up the public hearing on item, it looks like we have one, item 10A, ordinance 2021-29. A bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brim Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel SH9T, the premises to Western Airport Development LLC tenant. I'm assuming we aren't going to have anybody call in because we vote on these all the time and nobody ever calls in, but we're going to still take a few minutes. So let's take, you guys mind if we just hang out here for 60 seconds or so and then we can reopen it if somebody calls in? Anybody opposed to that plan? Okay, so we'll just wait for 60 seconds.
I just want to say, just getting back from Ohio, I believe Councilmember Waters is related to Bob Evans, and my wife was surprised to see how many Bob Evans are out there.
You know, Mayor Pro Tem, it's the one thing, right? Around the world, when you meet somebody with Ohio roots, it's the first question and everybody gets wide-eyed. Really? You are related to Bob Evans? Yep. Bob Evans married my father's sister. So Uncle Bob and Aunt Jewel. There you go.
Uncle.
So crazy. Small world, right? Small world.
I have to tell my wife that, who grew up in Cincinnati, and that was one of my father-in-law's favorite places to go.
Well, here's just an example. A number of years ago, when I was employed, I took a team. We were invited by a university to a conference, international conference in Korea. So we arrived in Korea. We're hosted by these university folks, all of whom had gone to Ohio State University. And they're, of course, speaking Korean, and we had interpreters. And I asked, any of you ever eat at a Bob Evans restaurant? Of course, they all had. And by the time, when I said, well, gee, he was my uncle. By the time we left, most of Korea knew that was the one credit that I really brought to the conference was a relationship with Bob Evans. So.
Mayor, on this item, we do have a short presentation, by the way, from staff.
With the airplane?
Hangar.
You mean the airplane hangar lease?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's keep it short because I can't believe that it's that different than normal. But let's go ahead.
Well, it's related to the air quality stuff.
Mayor, I'm going to drop the screen and give our live stream about 20 seconds to get caught up. It's been about 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and no one has called in at this point.
All right, go ahead, David. Mr. Slater?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. David Slater, Airport Manager. Just wanted to, and if Susan, if you can put up that PDF of the aerial layout, that would be helpful. Lease parcel SH-9T is a hangar parcel with a site plan that was pre-approved back in 2007. The lease next door to it, which is right behind the airfield electrical vault, is the lease for the air quality monitoring station designated AM-1. It is a non-aeronautical lease approved by council in February of 2020 for a 5-year term. The FAA requirements allow for non-aeronautical uses and leases unless there is an aeronautical demand for the property. The lease for the monitoring station includes a clause that if property is needed for aeronautical use, the lease will be canceled with a 45-day notice. If there's any question of priority, the aeronautical need has priority over the non-aeronautical needs based on FAA policy. But given some other challenges with the air quality monitoring station at the location, staff would like to briefly talk about that regarding data collection issues that have been encountered. And Ms. Jane Turner of Public Works will provide further information on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Jane?
Dr. Turner?
Yes, I'm here. Mayor and council, as you saw on that map, the addition of the new hangar is really close to the air quality monitoring station. And it was something that was unforeseen, but Dr. Helmig has already noted some complications with the data that we've been collecting just because it's so close to the airport. So we do have some concerns about another hangar being even closer to the air quality monitoring. And we believe that the best choice is probably going to be to move that station if that new hangar is going to go in. And we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that as this was coming through because that will be a few days that we'll be down on data to move that station to a nearby site.
All right, thanks for letting us know. So, Councilmember Christensen?
About where will that on the airport grounds, will that be located?
Mayor and council, we're still looking at a number of potential sites. This was something that we just learned about, and we want to do a really comprehensive review to make sure that we've considered all potential sources of, air pollutants in the area so that we're getting good, clear data. At this time, we're not certain that it will stay on the airport. It could be just nearby. But we're still looking at that. And I understand that it's going to be at least 90 days before they break ground on this hangar. So that will give us some time to do a good job of finding a new spot.
Thank you.
All right, can we have a motion?
Mayor, I believe you
Dr.
need to
Waters?
open a public hearing.
Oh, is anybody called in?
No, Mayor.
All right, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley.
Dr. Waters. Very good.
David or Jane, maybe it's Jane or Dr. Turner. Is there an estimated cost for the relocation of the air quality monitoring station?
Mayor and council, I'm optimistic that we can find a site that has electricity. If we can't, it would cost significantly more. But assuming that we have electricity at the new site, we're looking at $9,000 to $12,000 to move it.
And is that factored into the cost? Who's going to pay that?
That I'm assuming would come out of oil and gas revenues that pay for all the air quality monitoring.
All right, but that's $8,000 to $12,000 we're not going to spend on something else we could have used that money for to move the station to build the hangar, which seems a little odd that the person who wants the hangar wouldn't at least share that cost. Here's a related question, and it's for maybe David or maybe it's Harold. Harold, you and I had a conversation earlier about, I have no idea if from an overhead view of the airport, what land at the airport would anybody think to be land that you on which you wouldn't want to build a hangar because there are other assets that could be developed that would bring greater value to the airport and to the community. This doesn't look like one of those parcels. At some point in time, it would be really helpful for me, I know about other council members, to get your take on what are those parcels. So when we get another request like this, we could do that overlay and have the question answered. Is this property that we should be developing a hangar on, or should we be thinking about other possibilities?
If somebody can bring that graphic up, I can answer that question for you.
One moment.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Wasn't prepared to bring that back. Hang on.
Oh, that's not it. Let me share my screen. Let me pull a screen up. Let me do that for you if you bear with me real quick. All right. Let me. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
This is the location that they're talking about with that hangar. And so I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, that's really the last developable, it's a small developable piece in that area. Is that correct, David?
That's correct.
So it's only a small piece. When we talk about generally, when what we're looking at in terms of the future development at the airport, where the opportunities really exist, it is in this area right here, because that is the opportunity, especially as we've talked about before, this location here and the potential you have for broader industrial development that has that connection into it. So in terms of what I would say in prime development opportunities on the airport, this is really the area that fits that definition. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's real helpful. Is there anything on the north side or other parts of the airport that for you fall into that category of kind of prime real estate?
Let me bring
Just
this
that
back
one
up.
corner that's left over by my office.
Yeah, I'm bringing it back up to share with you. David, are you talking about this corner right here?
Yes, sir.
This corner here, that's really the last spot here on the north side of the airport.
Which
And there's a parcel here. The challenge with this one is just generally the current state of the infrastructure in that area. The infrastructure over here is tough, I guess, to put it mildly, to deal with. And so let me slide in. This is where the existing FBO is, and this is an open space here that I think has a lot of opportunity. This is where David's office is, and then you have this parcel here that is the other remaining parcel on the north side. This one, for a similar from a similar standpoint to the other, is you do have some interesting opportunities here off of Airport Road in terms of interaction. But that's the other piece. That's really all that's left on the north side.
All right, thank you.
All right, do we have a motion? I will move passage and adoption of ordinance 2021-29.
Second.
All right, I moved it, and we'll say I just saw Councilmember Christensen's lips moved first when I was looking at the screen, although I heard all of you. So all in favor of ordinance 2021-29 being passed by council this evening, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, ordinance 2021-29 passes unanimously. All right, we are now going to go on to general business. And is Eugene here?
Here, Mayor.
Hey, Eugene, sorry about that. So just before we start, we're about ready to do the appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission decision regarding Peakview Estates preliminary subdivision plat. And do you want to just give us a brief refresher on what is the legal criteria that we are to use when hearing this appeal?
So Mayor, the Longmont Municipal Code sets out the sort of standard of review. You are sitting in appellate role for the Planning and Zoning Commission. If you were to overturn the Planning and Zoning Commission, that is because the decision would not be supported by any competent evidence in the record. The Planning and Zoning Commission's decision was plainly inconsistent with the review criteria as shown by clear and convincing evidence, or the decision maker, Planning and Zoning Commission in this instance, exceeded its authority or jurisdiction as contained in the municipal code.
So we're not hearing this as if it was coming to council for the first time. We have to find one of those three reasons, right?
Correct.
All right. Anything else you'd like to share before we start?
That would be it.
All right. Well, I appreciate your input. Sorry for calling on you without giving you heads up, but
No problem, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, knocked it out of the park. Appreciate it.
Happy
All
to
right. So let's go ahead. All right, great. So we're going to go ahead and have a presentation by staff, and then we're going to invite the appellant, excuse me, to go ahead and provide their take. They will be limited to 35 minutes, although I'm sure we would love to hear less as far as time goes. And then the applicant can go ahead and have up to 35 minutes as well. So Ava, why don't we go ahead and hand it over to you and we'll get started.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley, Ava Pehejevsky, Planning and Development Services, and council members. Thank you. This item before you is an appeal of a Planning and Zoning Commission decision. Next slide, please. I'm going to walk you through the background of all of this, and then we'll turn it over to the other parties. Hold on, I need to move you guys off of my PowerPoint slide. This is an appeal of a Planning and Zoning Commission hearing that took place on April 17th. The applicant had sought approval of a preliminary subdivision plat for a 29-lot residential subdivision, and the commission conditionally approved the request with some conditions, and I'll go over that in the next couple of slides. And then within the 7-day period, we have 3 nearby residents who filed appeals of this decision. Next slide, please. So I'm going to walk you through just to orient you to the property, the red rectangle there in the box. This property is on the south side of 9th Avenue, 2725 West 9th Avenue. It is west of Hope. Lost our slide. There we go. Thank you. It's 7 acres. It is west of Hover Street, immediately west of Fordham Street in Boulder County, right there. And then it is east of Airport Road. And if you see this little triangle area on the south side of 9th, this is the Valley subdivision. There's a city park right dead in the center. That's the Valley Neighborhood Park. It's a city park. Of course, there's Twin Peaks Golf Course to the north, and Golden Ponds recreation area to the south. There's also a BNSF railroad that abuts the property on the south. So it was annexed in 2019. It was annexed with a zoning of residential single family. It is consistent with the envisioned Longmont designation, which is single family neighborhood. The properties to the east, immediately to the east, are zoned agriculture in Boulder County. And the properties to the north and south are zoned public. That would be the golf course and the nature area. And of course, we have the Valley subdivision to the west. Next slide, please. I apologize for the barking in the background. My husband just came home from work, so hopefully that'll die down shortly. So again, this property was annexed in 2019, again, by council. It was zoned residential single family. That's consistent with the land use designation that city council gave this in our comprehensive plan. Again, it was zoned designated single family neighborhood in our envisioned Longmont plan, which was adopted in 2016. The allowable density in this zone is up to 8 dwelling units per acre. Of course, this site is 7 acres, so they're providing a little over half of what's the allowed density. Next slide, please. And so there was some talk in the appeal about sprawl. Is this allowed? Does this meet the review criteria? One of the review criteria for approval of the subdivision is this proposal consistent with our comprehensive plan and any annexation agreements and concept plans? And so I'm just walking you through this. This property, if you look in the red circles here, roughly, in our comprehensive plan, this was, again, on the left side, this was before it was annexed in. This is when it was still in Boulder County, and all those neighboring properties that are still in Boulder County. As you can see, they're all designated. They were designated since 2003. It's been a lot of years. It's been designated as single family residential. It was called low density residential under our old comprehensive plan. I'm sorry about the typo there. It was from 2003 to 2016, not 1016. And then on the right side is our current envisioned Longmont comprehensive plan. And as you can see, this property and its neighbors in Boulder County, should they wish to annex, are all designated as single family neighborhood. That means that it's our expectation as a city that, should the neighboring properties wish to annex, this is what we would, if they ask to annex and they ask to zone it, we would think that the appropriate zoning would be for single family residential. Next slide, please. And so the request that came in was for a preliminary subdivision plat. This was after the property was, so the way the order of operations is you get an annexation, it gets annexed in with a concept plan. The concept plan is very similar to what you see here on your screen. It was for a residential subdivision. The next step would be to request a preliminary subdivision plat, which would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so as you see here, it was a plat, 29 lots. They range from 5,400 and change to 8,800 and change square feet. They meet our standards and our subdivision regulations in terms of minimum lot size, minimum lot area, et cetera. There are also outlots in this subdivision. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, that would be the south. I didn't want to flip this because, then you wouldn't be able, I'd have to scrunch it. But on the right side, that's actually south, and that's one big outlot. It's 3/4 of an acre, a little bit more, and that's a detention area that's required by engineering. And then if you look on the left side, adjacent to 9th Avenue, those are also outlots, and those are for landscape buffers, and that's to buffer those first houses off of 9th from any, traffic noise and such. And then in addition, they proposed 2 public streets. These again are consistent with what we saw in the annexation concept plan that you approved. This is for Peakview Lane, which would be a north-south street coming in off of 9th Avenue. And it would drop into Wade Road. Wade Road currently dead ends right here on the western edge, which would be like, right where Susan is, western edge of the property. So it's essentially carrying Wade Road up to its eastern property line. Reason for that is the fire department requires 2 points of access. And so the applicants are required to extend the road and stub it out to its property line. And so in terms of process, the way it works is you go through a preliminary plat review and it goes to Planning and Zoning Commission. If it's approved, it then comes in for a final subdivision plat, and that is reviewed administratively by staff. In the preliminary plat process, we don't do, the fully detailed reports. In that point, we're just doing preliminary technical reports like drainage reports, traffic studies, and so forth, geotech reports. And then if it's approved by Planning and Zoning Commission, then we get into the real details. And that's where our engineering team here at the city really dig in to the fine details of, for example, drainage. And in the preliminary process, we're really looking for more high level, conceptually, can this 29 lot subdivision work and not impact neighbors and provide appropriate drainage and so forth. And so that was looked over by our development review team, and I'll get into that in the next slides. Next slide, please. So again, there was a hearing on April 21st. Staff recommended conditional approval because we felt that it met the review criteria, and it was outlined in the staff report, which is in your packet. And just again, as far as packets go for Planning and Zoning Commission, we don't put technical engineering reports typically because, the Planning and Zoning Commission, they're just volunteers. They're not, professional engineers. And so we really rely on our professional engineers to review these reports, and they aid me and the other planners in making recommendations in our staff report. So the commission voted unanimously to approve this with conditions. The 3 conditions were that the applicant provide verification from Platte River Power Authority that they don't object, that they provide a statement of no significant impact from Colorado Parks and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and that they submit a migratory bird nest survey within a week of construction activities. If any nests are found, we then go through our mitigation process. And those minutes from that meeting are in your packet. Next slide, please. So we received 3 appeals from 3 parties. I believe one party will be doing a PowerPoint presentation and the other 2 parties will be speaking to you directly. And they will be talking about their concerns, which include impacts to water wells, drainage, wildlife and environmental concerns, and sprawl. Next slide, please. And so again, just to reiterate our process, you're hearing my presentation. The next, you'll hear the appellant's presentations. They have 35 minutes total. And then the applicant has a presentation as well. Then you'll open the public hearing, Mayor, and then council can ask questions of staff or the appellants or the applicant, and then do their discussion. At that point, there will be a rebuttal stage for staff, the appellants, and the applicant in case they want to rebut any statements that were made. And then finally, council will discuss and vote. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to introduce our staff real quick. So again, I'm Ava Pehejevsky. We also have Don Burchett here. If you had any questions about the riparian setbacks, Don's quite the maestro on those questions, so he's here tonight. Cameron Fawkes from Public Works Engineering is here. He reviewed the drainage reports and helped me in making the recommendations to Planning and Zoning Commission. We also have Tyler Dell here from Public Works. He's our stormwater engineer, and he's also obviously reviewed this project and can answer questions about stormwater. We have Mara Nelson from Public Works Engineering, and she's my co-project manager from engineering, and she handles all the streets and utility questions. We have Tyler Stamey here. He's, of course, our traffic engineer. And we have Jim Angstad, who's our Public Works Engineering Administrator. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I hope I gave you enough background there. I believe the appellant, Adam Sorois, is here to provide his presentation. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead with the appellant.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me? And
yes, sir.
Okay, great. Let's see, I don't see slides. Can those go up?
Give me just a minute.
Thanks. Just wanted to say it's a great honor to present to Bob Evans' nephew. Okay, so let's see. So this is a summary of why we're appealing. I'm a resident of the Valley subdivision, and I've been talking to quite a few of my neighbors about sort of our experience with this process and our frustration with the process, and why we really wanted to appeal this decision. First reason is there's quite a conflict between past comments from the developer and planning staff versus what has been presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission during that last meeting. And we think that there was an inadequate review by the Planning and Zoning Committee. And there appears to be some inaccuracies in some of the information, but I'm sure the city engineers will clear those up. So just a general comment, all of the following issues have been brought up multiple times at each stage of this process, at the community meetings, planning and zoning meetings, and the city council when this was presented last time. And each time the response is, well, this is just a 30,000-foot view of things. During preliminary platting, all of these issues will be resolved. It seems like that's happening again. None of these issues are really being resolved. And the community is frustrated and would like a second look at a lot of these things. So you can go to the next slide, please. So the first sort of examples are our perceived conflict between past comments from the developer and planning staff versus what was presented at the April meeting. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as Ava mentioned, this lot is right north of Golden Ponds, and it's a great asset to the community. During the 2019 Planning and Zoning Annexation meeting, the engineer from Rocky Ridge even touted that as a benefit of this development, saying, quote, "I imagine the continuation of the trail system going west to east on the south end." And by the way, all the quotes are taken from the YouTube recordings, and the blue text is sort of my commentary. So again, in the 2019 meeting, one of the city planners said, as part of the preliminary plat, it's going to need to connect to any greenways and trails. We need to figure out how this happens. During the city council annexation meeting in 2020, the city planner also said during preliminary platting, that would be the time to flesh out the crossing to Golden Ponds. And then during this April meeting at the Planning and Zoning Board, there's not a crossing. The BNSF suggested even building a fence now. And our frustration is that as part of the Longmont master plan, or whatever it's called, it sort of insists on multimodal transportation. And right now, the only multimodal transportation for this neighborhood is really just pedestrian access to the valley, or I guess there is a bike lane now on 9th Avenue. Next slide, please. Traffic has been a big issue that keeps getting brought up. During 2019 and 2020, one of the city traffic engineers said again, quote, "When we look at the long-term plans or needs for 9th Avenue, we're not anticipating a need for any widening." Then in the summer of 2020, 9th Avenue was widened. So that was very frustrating. During the planning and zoning meeting, Rocky Ridge engineer presented the things down at the bottom there. They admit that it doesn't meet city standards, but somehow includes an appropriate transportation plan and improved pedestrian and vehicular circulation without giving details. So we'd really like to see how details on how that actually happens. Next slide, please. As Ava mentioned, drainage has been a huge issue for this entire process. 2019, Rocky Ridge engineers said that they want to put a drainage pond on the south end, as Ava mentioned. And again, once we go through the preliminary plat process, we'll know exactly where the water table is. In 2020, the city planner said at the time of preliminary plat, we essentially press reset and do a do-over. We will require all new drainage studies, traffic studies, habitat and conservation studies. The developer has the obligation to provide the information we request. And then at the April meeting, as Eva said, there was no technical drainage or geotech report posted online, but they were sort of mentioned during the meeting from city engineers. One of them said that there's shallow groundwater. The geotech report we have is light on the impact it will have. And then I personally asked for those documents on April 14th and didn't get them, but then received them after the fact. And it appears from my reading that the water table measured in 2019 during a pretty historic drought year was 4 to 6 feet below the surface. So next slide, please. And let's see. One of the commissioners asked about the drainage pond and asked the engineer from Rocky Ridge, the detention pond area could be landscaped in a way when it's not wet and soggy. Do you have a vision yet as what you think that detention area might be used for? And the response from the developer was that it has a pretty steep slope, a 4-to-1 slope, and that it would be appropriate for activities like playing soccer, you name it. If I lived there, I'd definitely be playing in that detention pond. So I've zoomed in on the bottom here. So it's a 5-foot deep pond in an area with a 4 to 6 foot deep water table in a drought year. Seems like there's just going to be standing water there for most of the year. I looked into the drainage report a little bit more today, and it appears the outlet is set to be 2 feet below the minimum surface. So at minimum, there's going to be 2 feet of water in there. Doesn't seem like an appropriate place to play soccer. Next slide, please. The question has been brought up. What are the historic flows across the site? There's a section in the drainage report that has historic drainage, but doesn't have an actual flow number in sort of units of volume of water per unit time. So we'd like the engineer or city to address how the historic flow relates to the new flows. Next slide, please. And we think this is a legitimate concern. This area in 2013 was inundated with water. The sort of triangular property in the middle is the valley that Ava pointed out earlier, and the long rectangle on the sort of just right of that is the property in question. Next slide, please. Right, and then this was brought up actually at the April meeting and in emails to the engineer. As part of the new drainage, there appears to be about a 4-foot high swale or berm that's proposed to be developed along the west side of the property, along the valley subdivision, with a fence on top. And this seems in conflict with a comment from the engineer, Rocky Ridge, saying that this will not adversely affect surrounding properties. In my mind, having a sort of tall berm and tall fence in my backyard affects my property. Next slide, please. So Ava mentioned this. The question was brought up, is this urban sprawl? The response from the city was, when we think of urban sprawl, we think of development that is on the outer edges, along green belt buffers and expanding into it, annexing agricultural land. That's sprawl. Well, that's precisely what this is. This was previously zoned rural before annexation. It's directly abutting farmland, working farmland to the east. It abuts the green belt to the south. It's right at the western edge of Longmont. So if you go to the next slide, I've sort of highlighted the area. So you can see like the green part is open space or agricultural use. The valley is really the exception. It was developed in the 80s before some of this, these ideas of developing areas with an eye to conservation and sustainability existed. Next slide, please. We were happy to see that the wildlife and birds are taken into account. These were, again, raised in 2019, 2020. There used to be an active osprey nest on top of one of the power towers on the property. And we think, in this case, our concerns have been validated by the wildlife study and the zoning commission's requirement for further study. But we also take this to mean, to validate our concerns. We're not just saying not in my backyard. I think these concerns are valid. Next slide, please. And then just on to some frustrations with the meeting itself. I don't want to belabor this, and I don't want to sort of point fingers, but if you go to the next slide, during the meeting, the commissioners were sort of snacking and drinking and getting up and leaving, going off camera. It didn't seem right. And I think the city councilor should at least just say, hey, let's redo the meeting. Let's show some respect to the community. Next slide, please. A few other areas of concern that neighbors have brought up. Next slide. A few of my neighbors are engineers, and they've noted that a lot of signatures and professional engineer stamps are missing from a lot of the documents. They found that to be kind of shocking that this isn't a common practice. Next slide, please. So addressing the question of that this is actually zoned for up to 56 housing units. It's frustrating that this keeps getting brought up. So the property is 7 acres, but there's a 0.8 acre detention pond. There's about 2.3 acres of paved roads that are required. There's a setback on the north side, and when you subtract all those numbers, you're actually left with about 3.5 acres of land. And 3.5 acres times 8 is 28 units. So they're really right up against the maximum allowed units if you don't want to count building on paid services. Then someone else brought up the idea that the property to the east, the farm, actually has a conservation easement from the County of Boulder as part of their property, and it appears that the extension to the dead-ended Wade Road extension runs right up against that conservation easement. So we'd like to know how the developers or city is going to work around that in the future. Next slide, please. So our suggestions and requests: delay any further plat activity until permission can be obtained from Platte River Power Authority. I think that's already part of the suggestion from Planning and Zoning. Wait until drainage concerns can be addressed and water table measured under more realistic conditions, not in a drought year. Don't do another wildlife study in the dead of winter. The first one I think was done in January or December. This is a vibrant, thriving area. It's just recovering now from the floods. We'd like to consider creative uses for the site, or maybe limit the number of units to limit the sprawl. And then the access to Golden Ponds, this was a suggestion from the city council last time, is there needs to be a solution. There needs to be some creative solution, an overpass or whatever. If you want to keep continuing to develop this area, then it's just going to be more social trails crossing the railroad. And again, we really like the planning and zoning plat review to have an engineering focus and address the concerns raised by the community in a respectful manner. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and hear from the developer.
Oh, sorry. I think my two appellants wanted to add. Yeah,
you have time. We are at, just so you know, you have 20 minutes left theoretically. So
excellent.
If you'd like them to present, they may present.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
We can hear you. Yes.
Am I on? I'm sorry.
Mary, you are on.
I am on.
Yes. Could you start your video?
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor Bagley and council members for your time. My concerns are many, but most of them have been addressed by Adam. Thank you very much, Adam. I have 4 concerns. The water table, since the water table is high and you're planning on using 1 foot to 4 feet of fill dirt, how much higher do you plan on building each structure? Will it be no higher than 30 feet from where the land exists presently, or will it be no more than 30 feet from a possible 1 foot to 4 foot fill of dirt? We weren't sure about how you plan on doing that, where you're starting from. You indicated that you would build homes of like kind. The homes on Wade Road are bi-levels. Is that what your plan is, to build bi-level homes without basements because the water table is so high? Has a ground survey been completed? As I noticed on 9th and Main, they removed and added truckloads of dirt before developing. That took a very long time. Flood. Everyone in this vicinity to the east and west were impacted by the flood severely, both financially and emotionally. It looks to me as if you're going to build homes on a location that has potential flood risk. Wells. My neighbors to the north of me are concerned about their wells drying up or the builder perhaps shutting them down during construction. What is your plan to remedy either one of those situations? The power towers, where exactly will the detention pond be in relation to the proximity of the power towers that belong to Platte River Power Authority? Will you be building a fence around it to protect the children in the neighborhood? The last one is Leroy. My neighbor that abuts the outlet, that's the buffer outlet that you designated off of 9th Avenue, has indicated that he has property to the east of the ditch, south of 9th Avenue. Will you be communicating with him, as no one has approached him regarding that? He owns about 3 feet to the west of the ditch. He doesn't want the liability of kids playing in the ditch and getting hurt. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have one more appellant to hear from, correct?
Yes. Hello, my name is Jenny Gershader Lopez. I am one of the neighbors in the area, and I want to thank you, Mayor Bagley, council members, commissioners, developers, engineers, planners, and all of you who are present this evening. Thank you, Adam and Mary Rose, for what you have shared. And tonight I speak on behalf of the wild nature, the precious waters, the wildlife, and on behalf of some of our elder neighbors who would be present at this meeting if it was in person. At this potent time of growth, development, and expansion in Longmont, it is essential that we make choices that lead towards present wellness and future wellness for both our human communities and the ecosystems we are living among. Tonight, I will speak on a few topics that have been discussed in the P&Z meeting that was specifically on April 2021. So a commissioner referred to my comment that was my concern for the impact on the peace and quiet in the neighborhood and the surrounding area, as well as the impact on the wildlife, that this subdivision could be up to 56 units. And I want to say that the peace and quiet is not only for the people in the area, but it's also for the birds and all of the wildlife. Noise pollution negatively impacts human health. It affects wildlife. Human noise pollution can interfere with animal communications, hinder their foraging abilities, and impact where they live. Birds are the main producers of pollination and ecosystem balance within urbanized areas. And without birds and the loss of the birds within the wetland areas, the vegetation health can be severely impacted due to the lack of pollination. Therefore, it is essential that we consider the impact of increased noise pollution this development would create. This is on the water wells on Fordham Street. An engineering administrator spoke regarding the topic of impacting homeowner wells on Fordham Street. He said the intent is not to disrupt anyone's wells, and if basements are built, it would require a well permit from the state engineer, and a 600-foot analysis would be required. My question is, who would pay for those permits? Would those be the expense of the applicant, the developer, the city of Longmont, or the homeowner? And on Platte River Power approval, the commissioner spoke to the developer at the P&Z meeting, saying the applicant was advised over and over again that you need to have this approval from Platte River Power. It could result in a complete redesign of your project if it is not approved. I personally spoke with Western Area Power Administration, who also owns one of the large structures that is right on the south end of the property. And he said that one of the structures from Platte River Power has buried lines underneath that entire land, the 7 acres of land, that have 115 kilovolts transmission lines, and they have an easement on each side of that. And I'm just wondering if that information is taken into consideration here. He also said that a general home line has 13 kilovolts running to it. So these are very powerful and dangerous lines if interfered with. And there's also the envision that the underneath the power lines is the retention pond that might have a soccer field, and it just seems dangerous to have those huge power lines right beneath a community area. And let's see. On drainage, according to information on storm drainage of this land, excess water goes into the drainage ditch on the east side of the property. And there's a drainage ditch right on the east side of that entire property, which flows directly into Golden Ponds and then into the St. Vrain River. Pond 1 is the first pond that the pond and the drainage ditch flows into that was most affected in the 2013 flood and had to be rebuilt. That was just finished a few summers ago, and it's still recovering. Each summer there are algae blooms, which many of you know about if you walk at Golden Ponds, and fish kills. And the wildlife is just now establishing itself. For example, a beaver dam and a whole family of beavers is directly adjacent to the outflow of this channel. With an increase of residents within the area, there would be an increase of water pollution in that ditch due to human waste and disposals that would be introduced to the area and affecting the Golden Ponds nature area and the St. Vrain River and the wildlife living in and around them. Will there be a water pollution impact study? That was one thing that wasn't brought up yet. The mill ditch is also a safety hazard. So I know there has been animal drownings in it. And if there's children in their backyards, I'm curious what the plan is to do with that ditch that has water running through it. And when the water levels are high, it's a fast running ditch. So I'm curious who would be responsible for making that safe and for it also to be able to be maintained and cleaned out. And who is responsible, who would be paying for that? Is that the city or is that the applicant or the developer? As some of you know, Golden Ponds was a private piece of land that was donated to the city of Longmont by the VV Golden Foundation, Vernon Golden, who had mined gravel on this site. And he donated the land to Longmont citizens as a place to fish, walk, and enjoy nature. Golden Ponds is accessible to all folks and serves as a haven and access to nature right in the middle of the city. I hope we can preserve the wellness of the wetlands, the river, the wildlife for the long road and the future generations, as well as the nature areas, as well as all the nature areas as Longmont grows. As there have been so many setbacks with this project, it has been up for proposal for several years now. I take a leap and I propose that this narrow plot of land is to be rezoned to other uses, such as community garden to folks who do not have land access or a garden, and that the St. Vrain School District creates a garden for the elementary schools and begins to educate and create food source and healthy intergenerational community growth, or in some way that gives back to the natural world and the next generation, just as Golden Ponds, in which it is connected to, has inspired. So thank you all for your time and consideration for our appeals and our concerns.
All right, thank you very much. All right, do you guys mind if we take a 2-minute break? Or do you guys want to keep going? Well, let's just take a quick 2-minute break, restroom, etc., and then that'll let the developer get ready. So we'll be back in 2. All right, how's the appellant looking? Or I mean, the developer looking? Y'all ready to go? Do we have the developer here?
Mayor,
Are
I
they ready to
believe,
go?
I believe we do. It's Colin. Are you able to unmute yourself? Colin?
Yes, can you hear me? Wasn't sure if I should, I'll start my video here.
Let's just wait 30 seconds or so. I'm sure Councilmember Martin's gonna be back any second. All right, let's go ahead and continue.
Perfect, thank you, Susan, and everyone can hear me okay?
We can.
Good, good. So my name is Colin Jaminden, and I represent the applicant, who is Bob and Erin Young, and I work with Rocky Ridge Civil Engineering. So tonight I'm just going to kind of give you an overview and hopefully address some of the technical concerns that the applicants raised in their 3 letters. And then again tonight, go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are the ones that I'm going to touch on. Environmental, which seems to be an important one, groundwater, storm drainage, the PRPA power lines, the surrounding development, traffic, the railroad, BNSF crossing, and of course the engineering stamp. And again, my goal is to address those to the best extent possible. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so we start with the environmental wildlife impact. So there is a current habitat and species study, which was mentioned a couple of times. Some of the key language in that study was that that they concluded was that no threatened or endangered species or their obvious habitat were seen on the subject site, and no wetlands or waters of the U.S. subject to regulation under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act occur on the project. But there was some concerns about getting a more updated habitat and species study, and as such, P&Z made the recommendation to approve with us some additional conditions, and one of those was that the applicant should submit a migratory bird study needing to be complete within 1 week of construction activities, if those activities occur between March 1st to later date. It was August 31st. So with that and the other condition of providing a statement of no significant impacts from Colorado parks and wildlife and from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we believe that should address any concerns that may have not been met in the current habitat and species study. And even P&Z, they realized that another habitat and species study would be redundant. We would be willing to do one as an applicant, but we believe that the migratory bird study, when it gets completed, and getting those statements from those jurisdictions would sufficiently cover anything that the habitat and species study did not cover. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, groundwater. So groundwater, Adam was mentioning 4 to 6 feet, and I would say that is accurate for the geotech report at the south side of the site where the detention pond is being placed, and that also happens to be the low point grading wise. So there is an underground well, I guess I should say there's an existing sanitary sewer line that kind of follows Wade Road as it extends out of the Valley subdivision to the east and under that existing great drainage ditch. That's 13-ish feet below the ground. So that's well within the groundwater table already, and it's existing. And I did want to mention that there's an under drain that's going to be proposed in the detention pond. And we've been working with city staff, Kim Folks and Tyler Dell to work out some of the specifics as we move into the final plat on what that under drain is going to look like. But essentially it will keep the pond from filling up to the 2 feet mark, as Adam had mentioned, and it should keep it dry and safe and usable for residents should they feel the need to use it. And then there was some questions about the impact on nearby wells, specifically the state well permit for dewatering. So to ensure that there are no negative effects to the existing nearby wells, a state well permit will be obtained by the applicant. And this is because we are proposing that dewatering system I just mentioned, the under drain for the the detention pond. It falls under the category of a dewatering system per Colorado Code Regulation Section 402-2 5.2.18, where it says all dewatering systems require a permit. So we will be getting a dewatering permit, which falls under the well permits that would apply for the Peakview Estates project. So that should give us a really good idea of how the water table will be affected and if it will affect the surrounding wells to the east specifically. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so we got storm drainage. A couple of technical details when it comes to storm drainage. We talk about impervious area, and that is the amount of area that is not percolating water into the ground. So impervious percentage of the site, the Peakview subdivision, will be increased from about 5% to 50%. So that's a pretty significant increase. And that will generate more runoff. More water will be flowing along the streets, flowing into that ditch if there was not a detention pond. But per Longmont regulations and most stormwater standards, you have to provide a detention pond when you increase the impervious area and thus the runoff. That way you don't have negative impacts to downstream developments. And so that second point there, flood mitigation, is accomplished by the proposed detention pond. And it does discharge to that existing drainage ditch on the east, but it will do so at 90% of the historic allowable release as set forth in the City of Longmont Storm Drainage Criteria Manual. So working with city staff, we won't be releasing more than we can. That way we won't have any downstream impacts from flooding. I know there was a concern about the historic runoff from Valley subdivision. As of right now, the half of that runoff in the 100-year event actually goes into an existing drainage pipe that goes across the Peakview Estates site along Wade Road and goes right into that existing drainage ditch. The rest will overtop where we will extend Wade Road onto our property, and it'll flow down into the road, flow into an inlet, and if the 100-year event generates enough flow, it will overtop that inlet into the detention pond, where we will pass it through just like it historically does, with no negative impacts to the downstream developments, or in this case would be golden ponds. So hopefully that will bring to light some more of the concerns or answer some of the concerns regarding the storm drainage. Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, I wanted to touch on the PRPA power lines. So they are underground lines, and I actually was on the phone with an engineer representing PRPA today, and they provided a little more clarity. There's 2 underground lines there. One is owned by WAPA, or the Western Area Power Administration, and the other is owned by PRPA. PRPA came in after WAPA's was there, hence the reason why it's a 15-foot WAPA easement. And they ended up assuming all maintenance responsibilities for the WAPA line and theirs. So as one of the applicants mentioned, there's a 15-foot easement along the entire east side of that property, north to south. And as such, because of what's inside it, there is no fences allowed, and we cannot encroach within buildings or any vertical structures. And instead, we're going to put just a 10-foot ditch access road, which should help keep the existing existing drainage ditch, in better condition. And I do believe that will be maintained by the HOA will maintain the road, but the ditch will be maintained by the city since it's still in ditch property. But I'll let Ava or someone else correct me if I misspoke on that. The above ground lines, as you go to the south of the site, there's two large poles. One of them is WAPA, one of them is PRPA, and they're located right next to the detention pond outlet. And the outlet was designed for detention and can be utilized as a play area, really at parents' discretion. It's not intended to serve as a park since the Valley subdivision has that pocket park right in the center. So that meets the city requirements for distance from resident or lots to parks. So we didn't have to put a park, otherwise we would have different design criteria, and thus maybe a shallower slope, maybe some benches and stuff. But in this case, it'll just be an open area with a pan at the bottom. And as mentioned before, the underdrain should help prevent any standing water in the pond, making it usable for play area if parents feel like that's okay. We will be 20+ feet away from the existing electrical poles, and I haven't heard from Platte River Power Authority if they want those fenced in. I don't see any reason why we couldn't put a fence just to kind of delineate between the outlet and the fence and that high berm on the west or the east side. I would say that's not, I would agree with Adam, it's not the best for compatibility, but from our standpoint, some of the other compatibility requirements are just looking at like residential lot density and how other subdivisions were designed. For instance, it's pretty clear that Denaya or Valley subdivision is a lot denser than the Peakview Estates subdivision, whether we go to the 58 or the 26 or whatever we do, 29 is what we're proposing. It's still quite a lot less lots per acre than the Valley subdivision, which should provide a better transition between the ag zoned lots on the east side of Peakview Estates and the higher density Valley subdivision. Another subdivision that is nearby on 9th Avenue and Hover is the Denaya West subdivisions. And the Peakview Estates is much like that one. And lot size and product type are similar. And even with the differences between what we're proposing on Peakview and what Denaya West is proposing, Peakview is still compatible with the surrounding development mainly because it's consistent with the zoning criteria of the RSF zoning, as Ava mentioned in her presentation. That is the zoning designation that was taken on by this site when it was annexed into the city. And we maintain and are consistent with that zoning, Peakview Estates. And yeah, so hopefully that should address that concern. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, traffic impact concerns. There was an existing study done, and it's common procedure, at least in my experience with the city of Longmont and city staff, for the developer to hire a third-party engineer that will do the traffic study that must then be reviewed by city staff to ensure that it is consistent with all of the city's criteria, review standards, etc. And thus it's pretty well reviewed by city staff. And yeah, and then as far as standards are concerned, Peakview Estates traffic study was thoroughly reviewed and scrutinized by the city staff to ensure that the compliance was accomplished with the traffic standards set forth by the Longmont criteria. I don't see any issues with the traffic study and traffic impact. It's very minimal. And while I'm on this slide, I wanted to touch about the multimodal comment. While it's true that the pedestrian path to Golden Ponds may not be a thing because of some pushback from BNSF Railroad, there is, because of that secondary access point, as Ava mentioned, for fire, it just gives the pedestrians and cars another access onto 9th Avenue, kind of providing some more circulation. It doesn't provide an access across the railroad tracks. They'd have to go to Hover for that, or I believe Airport Road is the next nearest crossing. But if Ava or other city staff have more to say on the BNSF crossing, they can do so. But I am about to touch on some of the things on the next slide. So there is an existing pedestrian access, at least that's what it looks like on Google. There's a dirt path that leads from Wade Road just to the east of the eastern edge of Valley Subdivision. It kind of goes to the south, crosses the railroad tracks, and connects to a concrete path that's south of the railroad tracks, right along Pond 1, I believe, is what it is on the Golden Pond. So with that existing access, we did have some communication with the railroad company, and some of the specifics that they gave back to us were, we were trying to figure out, okay, would they be open to having a legal crossing at that location, the railroad company itself? And we were unsuccessful in getting them to approve it. In fact, they strongly recommended the installation of a fence, as Adam suggested or mentioned. They wanted fences on both sides of the tracks, as there was evidence of a lot of trespassing on their property. And they also indicated the small pedestrian bridge leading to the tracks on the south side should be removed, and that's by the Golden Ponds. So that's just a little bit of background on the communication we've had with BNSF. Thank you, Susan. Yes, so the engineering stamp concern is a valid concern. I talked to city staff and internally at our company, and the city of Longmont doesn't require stamps on preliminary drawings and reports like the preliminary drainage report and preliminary plat, but we will have to stamp them for final drawings such as the final plat, those more technical reports that Ava mentioned in her presentation that we'll have to submit. Those will all have to be reviewed and stamped by professional engineers before the city will even think about approving them. Plus, from our standpoint, from safety concerns, it's very important that only engineered drawings are stamped, final engineered drawings, are stamped, because we've had instances in the past where contractors will take preliminary plans, build off of them, and then because there was a stamp, now as an engineer, we're liable for those plans when we put our stamp on them. So they're incomplete. They haven't been well vetted by city staff to make sure their standards are met, and we haven't well vetted them because we've just had more of an overarching view versus like technical details. Like, we don't want to put our stamp on that for safety concerns, because the public may be at risk if a contractor goes and uses those plans inadvertently and does something with them. So just a couple of notes on the engineering stamp, and then final slide. So just in conclusion, per the submitted habitat and species report, the drainage report, which is just a preliminary report, the utility plan, the traffic impact study, grading plan, and requested statements of no significant impact that we will be getting from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. All applicable concerns, we believe, have been assessed and understood and determined to be satisfied, at least to the best of our knowledge from a technical standpoint. And we just want to thank you for your time. And a couple of last points from some of the applicants' concerns that were not listed in this presentation. One of them was about the water table and the depth of fill. As of right now, we will not be proposing basements because of the geotechnical recommendations of the high water table. We will be proposing an under drain system to provide hopefully some crawl spaces, but from a technical grading standpoint, we're estimating from existing grade as it stands right now, we'll probably on the east side be bringing in about 4 feet of fill to make those work for crawl spaces. If we decided to do no crawl spaces, that will result in less fill, which from a developer standpoint will be less cost. And so there's potential we may end up going that route as well. So hopefully that addresses most of the concerns, and thank you for your time.
All right, so as a council, what we need to decide. So first of all, if we have questions, that means we have to so council, if we're gonna ask questions, we reopen, everybody goes through the process of staff, appellant, developer again. So we, at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and call on council for comments. Councilmember, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. First of all, it's prudent that I make the disclosure that I am the Planning and Zoning Commission liaison, as well as that this project actually came before the Planning and Zoning Commission prior to my election to City Council while I was a sitting member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I need to make those disclosures. And if folks are on City Council are uncomfortable, I will recuse.
I don't see anybody, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't have a problem, and I don't think anybody on council at this point does as well. So thank you for disclosing.
One more thing first. Sorry, Mayor Bagley.
Go ahead.
I know you had Eugene recount these items before the presentation, but that was a fairly lengthy presentation. So I'd just like to remind council that the decisions are based on 3 items specifically, as far as the appeal is concerned. One being the decision is not supported by any competent evidence in the record. 2, the decision is plainly inconsistent with the review criteria shown by clear and convincing evidence. And 3, the decision maker exceeded its authority or jurisdiction as contained in the municipal code or charter. For 1, 3 to me is already a cross off because that is their authority as the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's easily crossed off in my opinion. 2, the decision is plainly inconsistent with the review criteria. I do not believe that was any additional evidence was presented that would show that it was inconsistent. While I made notes and can talk about each item that was presented in the appeal, that's not necessarily germane to the concept. I don't believe they presented anything that was outside of the jurisdiction or the plainly consistent review of the criteria. And then the decision not supported by any competent evidence in the record, I do believe that all of the items were, and even stated by the appellants, was that generally speaking, the conditions as proposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission spoke to a lot of those concerns. And while they still have those concerns, those were addressed by the Planning and Zoning Commission in their conditions to the approval of the project. So in my opinion, there's no reason to overturn the ruling of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I move upholding the Planning and Zoning Commission's ruling.
Second.
All right, there's a motion now on the floor proposed by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez and seconded by Councilmember Martin. Other comments? Councilmember Christensen?
It has always been my opinion that planning and zoning gives kind of short shrift to the review criteria, one of which is that it will not adversely affect the community, the surrounding neighborhood, and also the wildlife. And I do believe that they did not give sufficient review to what would happen, for instance, if the people who have wells in that area were cut off from those wells. Those are things that they've been using for 50 years, and it gives them self-sufficiency to some degree, and they don't have to pay for nearly as much water as they would have to. There needs to be something, needs to be something in the conditional use that discusses this. I would send it back to planning and zoning to put that in as one of the conditions, that they deal with the issue of who pays for that and also who deals with the drainage ditch. I do think that those need to be conditional uses and further discussions. You know, one of the saddest things to me is when I read something that Linda Lights wrote. It was immediately obvious that the concerns of the residents fell on deaf ears. I left the hearing feeling helpless and hopeless and like none of us mattered. I don't want anybody in this town, and I don't think anybody on council wants anyone to feel that way. We do listen to you, and we are reading your letters, and a lot of people wrote some very, very good letters about this. And I do think that there are enough concerns that they should make a few more conditions. And that's why I would not vote for this. That said, we live in a capitalist society, and from the very beginning of America, property has been what gave you standing in the community. Without it, you couldn't vote. So I would say to the people in the Valley subdivision that if you look at that map, the Valley subdivision was the anomaly there. They built that land using, like this, agricultural county land that was purchased by someone and rezoned. That's exactly what's happening here. So if you don't have the money to buy it, then the city doesn't own it. The city cannot decide that it's going to be turned into a park because we don't own it. That's the way it works, you know, and I'm sorry, but you know, this is a fairly small impactful development compared to the Valley subdivision, which was quite large at the time. And that's a very pleasant neighborhood, I think. So it's very difficult, but I would not vote to just run this through without having planning and zoning take one more look at it and put down a few more conditions. So, thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Am I still gone?
Councilor Martin, I'm sorry, I called on you and for some reason. my
Yeah,
mute didn't
no,
go.
I when I was trying to unmute myself, I hid my video. So I knew I was called on. I just couldn't get back on the screen. So first of all, either the developer or a city engineer or somebody, I would please like to have clarified the result of this dewatering permit, because that is, my understanding is that it would alleviate the concerns about ruining other people's wells, if that works right. Is that true or not true? And I don't care who answers it, but I need somebody to.
So I guess my question is, before we go in here, we can all talk questions and ask questions. But I just would remind everybody, this is opening up, this once again is opening up the legal procedure here is if we're asking questions and if we actually solicit further input from staff, we will need to go back and give everybody the same 35 minutes all over again. And so my question is, I would encourage people not to ask, well, if you want to ask the question, you can, we'll do it. But if you have enough information to make a decision, I would encourage us to make it. Other than that, we might as well all ask questions at this point because we're going to be opening it up again. So,
excuse me, Mayor
Councilman
Bagley.
Martin, go ahead.
I did not understand that. Can I ask the question of Council Member or of Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez?
Yes, you may. We can talk amongst ourselves all night long.
Okay. Is that your understanding, Mayor Pro Tem, of what the dewatering permit would do?
Thank you, Councilmember Martin. I will tell you that regardless of maybe some of the comments made earlier, as a liaison to Planning and Zoning Commission, I will tell you, they take no less than 2 to 3 hours on any agenda item. Their meetings last longer than ours. So to say that they don't give due diligence and time and respect to each item that comes before them is not accurate. I don't understand necessarily anybody that would say that residents' concerns are not heard, because I see and hear commissioners naming by name in their comments and questions people who have spoken in public invited to be heard, as well as those who are against or applicants as well. So I want to point that out, that planning and zoning commissioners meetings with less agenda items go longer than our council meetings. So to say that they don't give due diligence to items is incorrect. What I will say is that Public Works and Natural Resources, I guarantee, does their due diligence in water displacement without bringing on a staff member to abide by this. There was many questions, many answers from staff about the effects, deleterious or not, on the shallow groundwater wells that basically are for landscaping irrigation or hobby agricultural irrigation, because these are not large parcels between the Golden Pond Estates subdivision and what would be this subdivision. And we're talking about now, as far as frontage on 9th Avenue, maybe 3 tracks. I know on Fordham, there's multiple tracks that go to the south. And so many questions asked and answered, and Public Works and Natural Resources staff was confident that the engineering would not have a deleterious effect on the shallow groundwater wells for the adjoining properties to the east. Whether you'd like to open that up to a more expert opinion is up to you.
No, I am satisfied by that. I was also persuaded by the flow into the Golden Ponds area explanation, which I thought was well done. So yeah, no, I am satisfied. I just needed a better definition of terms than I had.
All right, thank you. Councilmember, we're going to go with Councilmember Waters, then we're going to go with Councilmember Christensen.
So I think my question, maybe Mayor Bagley, maybe of you, I suspect it's more likely. I have a couple of questions, more likely of Eugene. So Eugene, if you're there, I know you are. Of the 3 criteria, and Mayor Pro Tem, I think appropriately, I kind of checked off number 3. I think he checked off number 2, but I'm wondering about the wording of number 1. I can't imagine a lower standard to be applied to this than what's written here. So this could have been written that they're sufficient or necessary and sufficient or compelling or persuasive, but you use the word any. So if there's even the tiniest shred of evidence to support the record, we're in a position to approve the planning and zoning decision. Is that the intent here?
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. Thank you for your question, Councilmember Waters. So I remember when we were drafting this section of the Land Development Code, our intent was to make it similar to a Rule 106 appeal, which is appeal of an agency final decision to a judicial court. And those criteria loosely follow those criteria applicable to 106 appeals. And it is that is the evidentiary criteria from the Rule 106 appeals, any competent evidence. And it's meant so that the appellate body is there to correct plain error, not to second guess. It is really what that standard is about.
All right. Am I misinterpreting that is like the lowest possible standard one could establish?
It's a very low standard.
Yeah. It's disturbingly low from my perspective, but it is what it is. Mayor Pro Tem, could I ask you, since you are the most experienced member of this conversation, I think with P&Z, and we've not heard many appeals, right? At least in my term on council. This goes to P and Z, comes to us, not as a final plat, with a whole bunch of questions still to be answered. We have no information. PRPA, based on the notes here, has still not responded. There was a comment made earlier, so I'm asking you, not anybody else, comment made earlier about the potential redesign of the entire project based on what PRPA's response is. So in your experience, when I guess the applicant hears from PRPA or our staff hears from PRPA, and if that response requires an entire redesign, what then? Where does this go? It goes forward, but we're done with it because there was the modicum of evidence. I mean, yeah, what happens?
No, so as I think you were made aware in the presentation that was a condition of the approval from PRPA.
Yeah, I know we have to hear from PRPA. They haven't heard from PRPA, and when they
Correct.
do, if what they hear from PRPA requires a redesign of the entire
They'll have
project,
to go back to the drawing board, and
So
that
it's
is
back to
that is
square
part
one.
of that's part of the developer's risk, I guess, if you will, of developing a site, is that they look for something, and if they didn't do their due diligence and they don't get that sign off from PRPA and they have to redesign, they're going to have to come back through the process because they're going to have to change their plat, or they're going to have to change something, and it'll be a material change. It'll be a significant material change to the design and plat, and it will have to come back before planning and zoning, is my understanding, unless PRPA says that the engineers for the developer, I assume, did their due diligence and understood, as the gentleman that previously spoke to us said, they understand where the easement is and how they're going to deal with the easement. While I know that we haven't technically heard from PRPA yet, because this is how fast the appeal has come to us, because this was just last month that this approval happened. It hasn't been a few months. It was last month's meeting. And so it's a condition. And if they can't meet the condition, it's not approved regardless. Regardless of what we say.
It was an April 17th hearing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I read in the notes that somebody has been in touch with PRPA at least 3 times with radio silence from PRPA, which seems to me.
So that's a better question that I can't answer for you.
I get it. I know.
If PRPA doesn't ever respond, I don't know what the answer to that question
Yeah,
is.
I get that. Do you have a point of view on there's a county land conservancy on the property to the east, to which Wade Road would end, basically a butt. And so we have a Wade Road that stops as a road into nowhere then?
Well, so in the Valley subdivision, obviously how they planned it, they didn't just end it. They did stub it out, but they planned for extension of Wade Road from the Valley subdivision to the east. And so I believe it would probably be the same thing. And as we've seen from other annexations, sometimes developers are willing to pay out the conservation easement to buy that out. And that's what it would take, is somebody willing to buy out a conservation easement to further develop to the east. But considering when the Valley subdivision was built, nobody knew when anything was going to be developed further east at that time. So I don't find that to be of particular concern.
Last question. The 4-foot berm with a 6-foot fence, west side of this project, east side of the Valley project, right? Acknowledged by the applicant as not a very good solution, or I try to remember his words, isn't ideal, or whatever his words were. From your perspective, in your experience with planning and zoning, it's acceptable to in the interest of one development, to create a problem for the development next door in terms of that kind of dividing, whatever the method is for dividing or distinguishing between one development and another.
I agree. While it may not be ideal, I do not believe it required a variance. So by code, it is allowed by law. And unless we would like to change that, which is council's prerogative, and we can look at something like that in the development code updates. I don't think there's a lot that we can object to in the sense that it is private property. And that's something I would like to stress for folks, is that the city of Longmont doesn't own this property. It is private property. And within the law, they can develop it as they see fit, as long as it's within our code, whether we like it or not. This will come up, I think, a little bit later in a different conversation in tonight's agenda. But at this point, and I'm fully willing and very, I guess, excited to revisit these conversations about what our development code looks like. Don't get me wrong. I think that has a lot to do with affordable housing in a different conversation. But outside of that, this is what the law states. It's private property. And as long as they're within the law, they can do what they wish with their property. And so while it may not be the most, attractive thing that they could do to separate themselves from the valley on that western border, it's not against the code, and they did not ask for a variance because it doesn't require one. And, in our last appeal that we talked about, that was full of variances. And then that gave us a little bit, probably more room to talk about it. But in that specific instance, I don't think we can make a decision on this property based on a non-variance item.
Thanks. Great responses, by the way. I appreciate your knowledge and background on this.
Councilmember Christensen, do you have another comment?
Yeah, I do. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, I did not mean to impugn the Planning and Zoning Board by implying that they did not do due diligence, but because I've been to some of those meetings and they are really long. And I appreciate all the time you put. Our president was on many a planning and zoning board, and he said it's easier being president than being on the planning and zoning board. But all I have to go by is the notes that I read, which are excellent, by the way. Jane Madrid always gives us excellent notes from the planning and zoning board. I didn't see any real discussion, but maybe I missed it, about the well problem. And so that just concerns me, that these issues of liability, should somebody, everybody says now, oh, it'll probably be fine. But, if it's not, and these several households to the north and also to the east lose their access to well water, it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. So I'd just like to send it back to planning and zoning to have them take a look at the liability issues with the ditch and the liability issues with the water for the wells. That's all.
I guess I'll just respond briefly in that having been there, I remember a very lengthy conversation about it. Outside of that, you're obviously welcome to vote how you please.
All right, there's a motion on the table, and seeing no further hands. The motion is that we're voting yes. The council is passing a resolution upholding the planning and zoning decision. And the chair will, if there's no objection, I'm going to ask that we have a friendly amendment specifically stating the reason being that the appellant failed on the 3 items mentioned by Eugene earlier and then reiterated by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, so that there at least is a record of, I wouldn't say that's a finding of fact, but at least there's a record as to why we're making the decision that we did. Is that okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
We'll agree.
All right. And then the second on that was who? Councilman Martin? Is that okay? Still second? And you'll have to forgive me. We got a German Shepherd that just came inside. So all in favor? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
All right. So raise your hands if you're an aye. Okay, so the motion carries 4-3 with myself, Councilmember Martin, Councilmember Doggle Faring, and Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez as ayes, and then Councilmembers Christensen, Waters, and Peck as nays. So that concludes our appellate. That concludes our appellate decision. And let's go back to, as you can tell, it's not just a German Shepherd, it's also a German Schnauzer and a pit bull. But so let's go on to let's see here. Looks like we have an annexation referral from Meritage Homes along Highway 287. And if Erin Fosdick's here, she has a presentation for us.
I do, Mayor Bagley. Mayor Bagley, council members, Erin Fosdick with the Planning Division. Thank you, Susan. You can go ahead and go right to the next slide. Tonight before you, you have an annexation referral of approximately 26 acres over 2 properties, and you can see where the location of these properties are. Just west of Main Street, Highway 287, north of Highway 66, really north and east of the Willis Heights subdivision, and north and west of the Super Walmart on Highway 66. This property is within the Longmont planning area, which, as you know from Envision Longmont, is part of the future land use plan. So this area is within the LPA, which is defined in Envision Longmont as those areas we expect to urbanize within the city of Longmont at some point in time. The Envision Longmont plan does designate this property as single-family neighborhood, which the plan further describes as primarily being a neighborhood of single-family detached homes. I also want to mention that Highway 287 is designated as a regional arterial in the Envision Longmont plan. Next slide, please, Susan. As part of the annexation referral, we require the applicants to submit a concept plan, letting us know what their intention is for the property and what zoning they're going to request. So consistent with the Envision Longmont land use designation, they submitted this concept plan. This is a zoomed in version of what's in your packet. As you can see, they are requesting residential single family or RSF zoning, and this again is consistent with the land use designation in Envision. The proposed uses would be single family detached housing. They're also showing a central pocket park, detention, parking, circulation, landscape buffers. Obviously, this is more detailed than some of the concept plans that you've seen, but there still would be a lot of work, obviously, to flesh out the details of this, but this gives you a pretty good idea of what the applicant is thinking. I do want to mention that I have the applicant as well as a representative from Meritage Homes on the call tonight. So if you have specific questions for them at the end of this short presentation, I'd be happy to have them join me. Next slide, please, Susan. In terms of the process, you all have seen a few annexation referrals recently, so I know this is fresh in your mind, but an annexation referral is really the chance for council to determine whether the public interest is served by considering the annexation request. Obviously, this is in our planning area again, so it's something that's contemplated as being part of Longmont. If council does choose to refer the annexation into a formal application, there are numerous steps that are outlined here. You can see in the graphic the steps that we require for a major development application, including annexation. So they would come back in for a pre-application meeting, which would really outline all the steps they would need to take for an annexation application. We would hold a neighborhood meeting noticing all property owners within 1,000 feet of these properties. Then they would be able to submit an application with all other required documentation, which for annexation is a substantial number of documents. Those would all be reviewed by the Development Review Committee. That would go through full DRC review. They would make a recommendation to Planning Commission, who would then make a recommendation to council. We would hold public hearings with both bodies, and then council would be the decision-making body on the annexation request. They would need to demonstrate compliance with review criteria. We would obviously have an annexation agreement with the applicant, and then certainly they would need to satisfy all requirements of said annexation before we recorded that. So that's just to give you an idea of if you refer the property tonight, what the steps would be afterwards. Next slide, please. So this is really the end of my presentation, just to let you know what council's options are tonight. You can either authorize staff to accept this referral and process the application that we just discussed, and that would be finding that the annexation would be in the interest of the city. This referral would not obligate council to approve the annexation. You would do that at a later time in conjunction with a public hearing. The other option would be not to authorize staff to accept the annexation application, finding it would not be in the interest to consider the request. So with that, I'd like to invite the applicant, if they have any remarks, to join me. Certainly, I'm available to answer any process questions. If you have questions for the applicant, I have Karen Henry and Lisa from Meritage online as well. There's Lisa Albers. Hello. We'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have. Thank you.
All right, at this point, all we're doing is basically giving the go-ahead to staff to say, consider the annexation and bring it back to us. So I personally don't have any questions at this point, but other council members, do we have questions? Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I do not have any questions, but I would like to move to authorize city staff to move this forward for the annexation proposal.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Waters.
So Aaron, is this the time, or would it be when this comes back that you would want to know the kinds of questions that we want to have answered? Like what's the 50-year financial or economic analysis and impact study of extending our infrastructure that far north of 66? What are the extraordinary benefits, if any, to the community? What's the nature of the housing? What kinds of homes are we talking about? Are these executive homes? Are these working class homes? What should we expect in terms of the inventory? Because the moment we approve the annexation of the property, we have quadrupled or tripled or doubled or whatever the value of the land for the property owner. I want to know what the long-term costs and benefits will be. Obviously 90 homes is a benefit, and those people, to the degree that they pay, property taxes or sales tax in Longmont. But I'd like to see some numbers on that, and what Harold made a pretty good case in our last meeting when we were talking about utility rates and replacing or upgrading or restoring our water infrastructure, that there's a council 50 years from now that will be making the same decision about this project if it's annexed. So you want those questions tonight or later?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Waters, I can speak generally to some of what you just brought up, and then I would invite Lisa to talk about the types of housing that Meritage might be proposing. I'm guessing the applicant would be thankful to know what types of questions you might ask at an annexation hearing. In terms of some of the infrastructure, as you know, we do not require a fiscal impact analysis with annexation. That's certainly something that the applicant can provide, and I know some applicants have included that information, but that's not something that's required as part of annexation. I will say that it is the city's policy that development pay its own way. So any of the infrastructure that will be needed to serve this development on or off site will be required to be paid for by the developer. In terms of additional fiscal impact analysis, that's something that certainly council could request. I think you're also aware we no longer require exceptional benefit, but certainly the applicant could include information on what they see as the exceptional benefits. Really what we would want to see from this applicant in an annexation application is how they are furthering the vision, guiding principles and goals stated in our comp plan, and how they're contributing to the city, finding obviously that this is a benefit to the community of Longmont. So that's kind of a general answer. And if you want more specifics, the applicant could certainly look at providing that when they come back to you, if council does refer this. I would also invite Lisa or Karen to talk about the types of housing. I'm not sure if they're that far along in their process other than knowing it's single family detached, but obviously Meritage has homes in Longmont and throughout the Front Range, so they could probably let you know what they're thinking a bit at this point.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, first, I would like to allow our guests to respond to Councilmember Waters if they would like to.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa Albers. I'm with Meritage Homes. I'm the VP of Land Development, and I'm happy to be here tonight. And I have to have to say, Aaron, you did an excellent job of the presentation. So I hope I can really focus in on the questions you had on Meritage Homes, but we are building in Longmont right now at Harvest Junction. We've done quite well with our product out there. Meritage Homes is truly a first-time home buyer and what we call a move-up home buyer. So maybe you start adding to your family and you move up to a larger home. So we're looking at 50-foot wide lots. So somewhere between a 30 and 40-foot wide product, 2-car garages, all detached. So really just modeling what we've done in Harvest Junction. We might offer a little more diverse, smaller and the same type homes. But we're really trying to target that market in Longmont, especially right there off 287-66 with the Super Walmart really close by. We just think it's a good move for people to live close to commercial and retail and access to the highways.
And how many home sites was this again?
There were 99 on the concept plan.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Peck?
No, sorry.
I just want to, oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem goes next. And then I'll.
Right, I was just allowing for a response to Councilmember Waters'
Yeah, no,
question.
I forget, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry, I forgot. So just go ahead and then we'll go with Councilmember Peck.
Yeah, all right, sounds good. Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think my positioning on annexations has been fairly consistent and clear over the last number of years, as in that I'm generally always in favor of getting land into the city's purview versus allowing it to be county driven. The other statement I would like to make is that we have before not approved annexation requests because they weren't providing necessarily the product, or we had concerns about the sustainability based on what the council's vision has been concerning housing. And so for me, I look at the size of the property, 26 acres, more or less, the location and adjacency to commercials such as the Super Walmart, as said, as well as the location on Highway 287. To me, these things scream out to me a little bit more density. You know what I'm saying? I could see lining the adjacent subdivision with single family homes and then having more density, maybe townhomes or paired housing along 287, because we're talking about a major route. We're talking about a state highway there where we do have buses coming up. We have close adjacency to a commercial center where you can go get your groceries if you need to. So to me, that just screams that we're underutilizing the property at 99 homes on 26 acres. And so that's one thing I want us to consider as a council, because we talk about this. And to me, if we just stick a bunch of single family detached homes, that to me is getting towards the concept of urban sprawl. Because I know when we recently talked about the Terry Lake annexation, we're talking about mixed use, multiple different kinds of housing products. And so that's what worries me about this annexation. I'm pro annexation because, like I said, I'd like to get it in our jurisdiction. But I think this is a prime property where you could put you could do it appropriately, where it could be mixed neighborhood, residential mixed neighborhood instead of residential single family. Because like I said, adjacency, you align the properties in Willis Heights, I believe is the name of the subdivision. And you have those be single family detached. So, there's not a big crazy gap there. And then you have a little bit more density closer to the highway. And I see that as a great opportunity and an exceptional benefit for our housing stock in Longmont. So that's what I'd like to see as some suggestions. But as like I said earlier, council already knows my position on annexations. And so I will be in favor of referring this for approval, but I would like to see maybe some more thought put into a little bit more density. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. I agree, and was actually going to say some of the comments that Mayor Pro Tem made, as we are struggling with getting the north end of 287 to be more dense And this would be a prime example. I wouldn't even mind having an apartment building because we're probably not going to have the concerns with other developments that are being annexed. For example, traffic or multimodal, again, being close to retail. So I am excited to see this annexation come through. I think it's exactly why and how we need to build. And to Councilman Waters' point, one of the big reasons that we should annex this in is that if it is within the city's boundaries, then it would have to comply with our inclusionary housing ordinance, and we would get more of our affordable units that we desperately need. So.
All right, Councilmember Martin and then Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, I want to repeat that what everyone has said so far, which is, I think, yeah, we should refer this for annexation because we don't want it to be developed in a way that is antithetical to our vision for the city. But before approving an annexation, I would like to see a concept plan that was denser, maybe taller. I mean, you know, we can't build tall inside the city because of various considerations of respecting the neighborhoods, but we can do it out there on the edge. And I'd like to see a lot more density and affordable units.
All right, Councilmember Christensen, and then if someone could give a motion after this, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that this actually fits in really well to what is adjacent to the west. And I think it's a pleasant looking plan. I would urge you, as Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez has said, to put in some denser housing to the west, or to the east by the highway, because that would be very helpful. And because what we're trying to do, what we need to do is tie this town together, have our entrance on Main Street actually look like an entrance, and have that be, you know, just put some love into that area. And if we had enough people up there, if we had sort of another anchor up there, that would probably be a lot more useful than the old fishing tackle shop and and the marijuana shop. And anyway, yeah, I think this could be a very important development to helping us develop North Main in a little bit more vital way. It's been kind of the red-haired stepchild of Longmont, and it's a great area. It's higher, and it needs to get its own share of what we're doing with the rest of the town. So good luck.
I move to refer the annexation.
Mayor, there was already a motion on the floor by Council Member Peck, seconded by Marcia, to refer.
Okay, thank you. Then with all the love towards redheads and stepchildren I can muster, let us take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, then the annexation referral passes unanimously. And my advice, Ms. Albers, is just stick close to staff to make sure that the concerns of council are met head on well before we vote on this. It'll save everybody some headache. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys wanting to build in Longmont. We're a great community. You'll enjoy it. All right,
thank you.
Let's go on to item 12C, the 2021 legislative bills recommended for city council position. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I know there are none on the agenda, but because this is normally Assistant City Manager Cedar's item, I would just like to wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday. So, so Mayor Pro Tem, I would say we'll all sing like the pledge, but if you'd like to sing her happy birthday, I think now would be an appropriate time.
Sure thing. Assistant City Manager, this is for you. A happy birthday.
Wait. Sandy, I want your video on.
Okay, I'm here.
All right, now we're ready.
Now we can go.
Mayor Pro
Now we can
Tem.
go. Well, I encourage anybody to sing along if they would like. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Sandy Cedar. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, members
Happy
of council. And there is no
birthday.
legislative update today. You're right.
All right. Okay, it's now time for final call, public invited to be heard. So let's go ahead and take a 3-minute break. And if somebody calls in, we will leave it up during that next call and have everybody give their say. So anyway, we'll be back in 3. All right, we've got about 10 seconds left before a 3-minute break is up. So let's all come back. And did anyone call in?
Mayor, we do have one caller.
All right.
And
I
we
kinda
have
figured we might
another.
have a couple.
Yep.
All right.
I'll go
So
ahead and
let's leave it
begin with.
up. Yep, let's leave it up to the first caller, please.
Very well.
Okay, and then cut it off. All right, great.
So the first caller, your phone number ends in 663. 663. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Caller 663, are you there? There you are.
Yes, here I am. I just have to get out of the other room. My wife is watching right now. My name is Clark Allen. I live in the Greens. Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, so there's nothing going on the TV right now, or am I just delayed? Is that it?
You need to listen
Yes.
to us through your telephone, not watch the live stream.
I'm not. I'm upstairs.
Okay.
My wife is listening to the live stream and she says nothing is happening. That's all. Anyway, may I start then?
You certainly may.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to stay late and listening to me. I just wanted to say that I greatly appreciated the presentation today of the public or the individual. Hold on a second. My wife is just yelling at me. Okay, let me go on. So anyway, and I really do think that they brought up some really valid points today. I really do believe that to some degree, you've overlooked a dramatic point which relates to the wells. I've come out of Wyoming where I have seen more and more wells that have gotten destroyed by developments. And I do believe that the wells in this area will be really negatively impacted, especially when you take that drainage basin away from them in those 7 acres and the amount of additional fertilizer that will go into there. Unfortunately, I have a friend who personally lost a well due to the fact that he had the development put around him and his well got polluted by the fertilizers that people were using on their lawns. And it was pretty upsetting for him. And I really, really encourage you to go back and take a strong look at that. I also do believe that the more and more we build over in this area, the greater and greater our flood-related problems are going to become. And I don't think we're effectively really looking at that. It's a problem we've had. It's a problem that was dramatic. It was a problem that I was dramatically personally impacted by and never want to see happen again. And I don't think anyone is taking enough energy and time to really look solidly into that aspect of what this development is doing. The last piece is this whole business about traffic. And I'll tell you, I'll be real honest with you. I moved in here almost 10 to 15 years, 15 years ago, and I used to be able to get down Airport Road, driving the speed limit within from here to entering on heading towards Boulder in about 7 minutes. It now takes me 15 minutes to get from my house down to that point, and it's strictly because the traffic has so dramatically increased in this area. And I don't think that having a road going 45 miles an hour also within this area, I think that we're just not really taking anything into consideration when it comes to developing and just expanding and expanding and expanding this city without giving any consideration to how you're going to deal with the traffic and the pollution associated with it.
Sir, I'm gonna have to cut you off because we're well over 3 minutes, but I appreciate you calling in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, next caller.
All right, the next caller, your phone number ends in 812. 812, are you there? Caller 812, there you go.
Oh, hello. Mayor and council members, my name is Betty Brown Nunley, and I was pleasantly surprised today when I was riding the bus. I looked up and I saw a poster of Rosa Parks, so I just wanted to mention that. It was very nice to. I'm black myself, and it was nice to see a black poster on the bus. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. All right, is that it for our callers?
Yes, Mayor, it is.
All right, great. Then let's move on to mayor and council comments. I've got one. Let's go with you. I'll wait though. Councilmember Peck.
Oh, you should go first, Mayor. That's fine.
Okay, great. I was just going to say I was asked by a group here in town sponsoring the Juneteenth celebration for 2 requests. Number one is they would like to use the flagpole at City Hall. And I was like, I don't know if we have do we have a flagpole at City Hall? But if not, the choices are City Hall and Roosevelt. And they want to film the raising of, use the flagpole to film the raising of the Juneteenth flag. And then in addition, on June 19th, they would like us to fly the Juneteenth flag beneath the American, state, and then the Juneteenth flag. And I told them, I don't think that'd be a problem, but I don't get to make those decisions alone. And so I wanted to see if that would be possible, Harold, and do it in a way that my fellow council members could voice their opposition in the event that there was opposition. Is that going to be a problem for anybody? And I can just coordinate with you when they reach out to me, and we can do that if that's okay, Harold. All right, cool. I saw Harold give a head nod. So let the record reflect that either Harold's playing video games and is really excited, or he just gave us his blessing.
I wish I were.
To go
I
forward.
wish. No, I'm not playing video games.
No, I know you're not. I know
yeah,
you're not.
let's just talk about it.
All right, cool. All right. I just wanted everyone to hear that I asked. All right, and got tacit approval. All right, then let's go ahead and Councilmember Peck, then we'll go with Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you. I just wanted council to know that I testified today for Senate Bill 21-238, which is that rail special district bill, and just reaffirming that council supports that bill with the amendments submitted. But I also voiced my concern about getting it passed on the ballot with the residents of Boulder County being frustrated with the tax for RTD, adding another tax, and offered another amendment that they submit the bill without the taxing authority. And that once we had all of the costs and where they wanted it to go, that they go to the legislature with all of the upfront costs and get the taxing authority at that time after it passes. So I just wanted, they probably won't take my amendment, but I wanted to say it. So there you go.
Councilmember Peck, on behalf of council, at least myself, A, thank you for your continuing ongoing concern for rail, and B, thank you for taking your personal time to go down there and do that. So we appreciate that. Thanks. Councilmember Christensen.
I'm so pleased, Mayor Bagley, that you have been talking to the Juneteenth people. I've been nagging various people for the last 7 years to have a Juneteenth celebration. If people don't know what Juneteenth is, look it up. It's something we all ought to celebrate. And so I am really happy, and I will keep mentioning it every council meeting until Juneteenth, that we're going to have a celebration here. It's something we ought to be very proud of, that we finally got rid of slavery. So thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think as some folks, if they've been tuning in the whole time to our meeting tonight, heard that I just recently returned from a trip to Southern Ohio. And I will tell you that after said trip, I will tell you, I cannot be happier to be back in Longmont and to be a representative, at least for the time being, in Longmont, and the good work that we're doing and seeing, you know, the challenges that are facing municipalities across this country, not just based on the pandemic, but based on varying factors. You know, in Ohio, obviously, that's a Rust Belt state, and they're trying to reinvigorate their economy in a way that we don't necessarily have to worry about. And so I just feel so blessed to be a part of this community. And I hope everyone else feels blessed too. I know that we can always make it better, but boy, oh boy, when you go and see some other parts, you understand how blessed you are. So I hope folks know that we're working to try to make this better, but could be worse.
That was the softest insult at Dr. Waters' in-laws that I have ever heard. And I thought that was awesome. So yes, Dr. Waters' in-laws suck. And that's great, Mayor Pro Tem. And I agree with you. I don't want to live there either.
That doesn't go without a rebuttal.
I'm just kidding. Bob Evans. Yeah, I love food. Go ahead, Dr. Waters.
I'm just going to say amen to what we just heard from the Mayor Pro Tem. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else to say? All right, great. Then let's go ahead. Harold, do you have anything?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Eugene?
No comments, Mayor.
Awesome. I know it's been a busy couple weeks for you guys. Well done. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
I will second. I'll give Dr. Waters the opportunity to second. So Councilman Martin has moved that we adjourn. Dr. Waters has seconded it graciously. Let's go ahead and make a vote. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right. The ayes have it unanimously. We are adjourned. See you next week, guys.